The rain didn't just fall, that night it tore through me. I stood there, drenched, clutching the letter I never meant to find. His handwriting still warm from her hands. In that moment, I knew. Love doesn't always belong to the one who loves more. You're watching the Untold Love where hearts speak in whispers. Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every story here is a heartbeat you've felt before. I met him on a day I wasn't looking for anything. Not even a conversation. It was one of those winter afternoons when the air feels heavy, like it's carrying the weight of unspoken stories. His name was Evelyn. Mine, Daniel. And though we didn't know it then, that quiet meeting would alter the rhythm of our lives. We first crossed paths in a small book cafe, tucked away on a street most people passed without noticing. I was there, hiding between pages, letting the smell of old paper shield me from the world. He walked in not loudly, not with grand gestures, but with a stillness that somehow pulled the room towards him. It wasn't love at first sight, not the way movies tell it. It was subtler, like a soft thread tying us together before we even spoke. We exchanged a few words about a book, about coffee, about how the city feels different in the rain. Those words didn't mean much on their own, but together they created a space I wanted to step into again. Over the next weeks, we found ourselves meeting more often. Sometimes planned, sometimes by accident. At least that's what we told ourselves. Daniel had this way of listening that made me feel seen without judgment. His laughter was rare, but when it came, it felt like sunlight, slipping through heavy clouds. I didn't realize it at first, but I began shaping my days around the thought of him. A stop at the cafe, a walk along the park he liked, a playlist we once talked about. My friends noticed the change before I did. They said my eyes had a softer light, my voice carried a warmth it hadn't before. But what they couldn't see, and what I didn't yet understand, was that I had already started to place him at the center of my world. Every choice, every plan, every moment of joy, unconsciously tied it to him. I told myself it was natural, that love is about giving, about building someone else's happiness as if it were your own. And so, I gave not in grand, dramatic ways, but in quiet sacrifices. Missing sleep to talk to him after his long days, skipping plans to be there when he needed silence, forgetting my own needs in the comfort of making his life lighter. In those early days, I thought love was about how much you could give without asking for anything back. I didn't yet know that sometimes giving everything can also mean losing yourself. The days that followed felt like a soft unfolding, as if life had decided to slow down so we could notice each moment. With Daniel, time didn't feel rushed. Even silence with him had a kind of music to it, quiet, steady, and strangely comforting. We began to share little rituals. Morning texts that were never dramatic, just simple words like "Good morning, you okay?" or "Don't forget breakfast." Coffee on Saturday afternoons at the same table in the cafe where we met. Walks through the park where we'd argue playfully about which tree looked older. They were ordinary moments, but in my heart, they felt extraordinary. Daniel wasn't overly expressive, but he had his own language of love, one I learned by heart. The way he would tilt his head slightly when listening, as if every word I said mattered. The way he remembered details I had mentioned once and never repeated. The way he would send me a song late at night because it reminded me of you. I found myself doing the same, except maybe more. I wanted to be his anchor, his quiet place when the world grew loud. I listened to his worries without rushing to fix them. I laughed at his bad jokes even when they weren't funny, because his eyes lit up when I did. And whenever life seemed to wear him down, I stayed, sometimes with words, sometimes just with presence. Looking back, I realize I was giving more than I noticed. Skipping plans with friends because he had a bad day, staying awake until 3 a.m. because he needed someone to talk to, even when I had an early meeting. Choosing to listen instead of share, because his voice always seemed more urgent than mine. It wasn't that he asked for these things, he didn't. But love, I thought, meant putting someone else's needs above your own without keeping count. And so I gave. My friends warned me in subtle ways. Don't lose yourself in someone else, they'd say with gentle smiles. But to me, this wasn't losing, it was loving. And in my mind, if I loved deeply enough, he would feel it, understand it, and hold it close forever. What I didn't see was how quietly the balance was shifting. And how easily love can become something you give away without realizing you're leaving nothing for yourself. It didn't happen all at once. Love rarely breaks like glass, it erodes, like stone underwater. Slowly, almost silently. I began to notice it in the smallest ways. Daniel's messages came later than usual, and when they did, they were shorter, lighter, like words chosen out of habit rather than feeling. Our conversations, once flowing endlessly into the night, started ending early. He still smiled, but it no longer reached his eyes. I told myself it was stress, work deadlines, family matters, maybe just exhaustion. I didn't want to believe that something deeper was changing. I reminded myself of all the good days, all the times he had been there for me. People have phases, I thought. This was just his. But the space between us grew without warning. He began canceling plans once because of a late meeting, another time because he wasn't feeling up to it. I understood. I told him it was fine, but each time left a quiet ache. I tried to bridge the distance. I planned little surprises, sent him handwritten notes, even cooked his favorite meal and left it at his door when he wasn't home. He thanked me, but his voice lacked the warmth I once knew so well. Then came the weekend. He disappeared without explanation. No calls, no texts, just silence. I stayed awake both nights, phone in hand, scrolling through our old messages as if they could explain this absence. When he finally replied late Sunday, all he said was, "Sorry, I needed time to think." The words chilled me. Think about what? About us. About me. I didn't ask, partly out of fear of the answer, partly because I didn't want to seem desperate. Still, the fear lived in me. I began replaying moments in my mind, searching for mistakes I might have made. Did I say something wrong? Did I love too much? Was I no longer the person he needed? But what hurt the most wasn't his fading presence, it was the way I began fading too. My laughter grew quieter, my days emptier. I stopped reading, stopped visiting the cafe, stopped doing the things that once brought me joy. It was as if my whole world had been built around someone who no longer stood in the center. And deep down, I feared I was already watching us end. Without either of us saying the words. The night it happened, the rain was relentless, sharp against the windows, echoing in the quiet of my apartment. Daniel had said he'd be working late, so I stayed home, curled up with a blanket, trying to drown the unease that had been growing in me. I don't know why I went to his place that evening. Maybe it was instinct, maybe a need to see him, to remind myself that we were still us. His door was unlocked. I stepped in, expecting the soft chaos of his apartment, the hot books on the couch, the coffee mug on the table. Instead, the room felt different. Still familiar, but colder somehow. That's when I saw a tan envelope on his desk. Half opened, the paper inside, peeking out like it was waiting to be read. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that. But my hands moved before my mind could stop them. Her name was written at the top. Not mine, not even close. And the words beneath. They were tender, warm, so achingly alive with feeling. He spoke of her laugh, of how she made him feel seen, how he was certain she was the one. Every sentence was a weight pressing against my chest. I read it once, then again, hoping that maybe I was misunderstanding, that maybe these were lines from a book, lyrics from a song. But they weren't. They were his words, his handwriting, his truth. When the door finally opened and Daniel walked in, the letter was still in my hands. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world stopped. I searched his face for denial, for confusion, anything that could make this a mistake. But there was only silence. And in that silence, I had my answer. I didn't shout. I didn't cry, not yet. I simply placed the letter back on the desk, my fingers trembling, my heart screaming in ways my voice couldn't. He said my name once, quietly, almost as if he was afraid to hear it out loud. But the words I wanted, needed, never came. No apology, no explanation, just the heavy stillness of something breaking. And in that moment, I knew love doesn't always belong to the one who loves more. I didn't leave right away. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the letter on his desk as if it might dissolve into nothing if I looked long enough. But the truth doesn't vanish, carves itself deeper the longer you face it. Daniel moved closer, his steps hesitant, as though he was approaching something fragile, or something already broken. His lips parted, but no words came. I waited, because some foolish part of me still believed he might say I made a mistake, or she doesn't mean what you think she does. But the seconds passed, and all I got was silence. And that silence hurt more than any confession ever could. I turned toward the door, my coat hanging limply from my arm. He said my name again, softer this time. I didn't look back. I couldn't not when my eyes were burning and my throat was tightening around the words. I didn't want to say, why wasn't I enough? Outside, the rain had not let up. It fell in heavy sheets, soaking me within seconds. But I didn't run. I walked, slowly, as if each step was both a release and a surrender. The city around me blurred into streaks of light and shadow, but inside my mind, every memory of us played in sharp, unkind detail. I thought about the nights I stayed awake just to be his comfort. The mornings I skipped my own plans to make space for his quiet sacrifices that felt like love at the time but now looked like pieces of myself I had given away without knowing if he wanted them. When I reached my apartment, I sank onto the floor, still dripping from the rain. I didn't cry right away. The tears came later, when I realized it wasn't only him I had lost, it was the version of myself that believed love alone could keep someone from leaving. That night, I decided I would not beg for explanations. I would not fight for a place in someone's heart if they had already given it to someone else. Loving him had been my choice. Letting him go would have to be my strength. And as the rain kept falling outside my window, I whispered to the empty room more to myself than to him, "This is where I stop." Years passed. Time didn't erase everything, but it softened the edges of the pain. Life moved forward in quiet ways, new faces, new routines, moments of laughter that didn't feel forced anymore. I learned to fill my days with things that were mine alone. There were still nights when I thought of Daniel, not with the ache of longing, but with the stillness that comes when a storm has long passed. I stopped asking why and started asking what now. Slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt the parts of myself I had once given away. Then one afternoon, in the middle of an ordinary day, I saw him again. I was crossing a street when I noticed a familiar figure on the other side. It was Daniel Oder, a little more worn, but still unmistakably him. Beside him walked a woman, her arm looped through his. Her laugh carried across the street, warm and genuine. I didn't need to guess who she was. They stopped at a corner cafe, and for a moment, he turned his head. Our eyes met. There was no shock in his expression, no guilt, just a quiet acknowledgement, as if we were two chapters in the same book who had simply turned in different directions. I waited for the sting, the rush of sadness I thought might come. But instead, I felt calm. Not because I had forgotten, but because I had healed. What once felt like the end of my world now felt like a story I had survived and learned from. As I walked past them, I smiled not for him, but for me. Because I knew that my love hadn't been wasted. It had taught me the depths of what I was capable of feeling, and the strength it took to walk away when staying would have meant losing myself. Sometimes, the greatest love you can give someone is to set them free. And to set yourself free with them. I never looked back after that moment. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood some stories aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to change you, to teach you, and then, to let you go. And that was it. No dramatic goodbye. No final words to close the chapter, just the quiet certainty that it was over, and that it was okay. Walking away that day didn't feel like losing. It felt like releasing a weight I had carried for too long. For years, I believed love was proven by how much you could give, how much you could endure. But now I know love should never cost you yourself. I thought back to the girl I was when I met Daniel. Soft, hopeful, willing to bend until I broke, and then I thought of the woman I had become, steadier, clearer, no longer searching for my worth in someone else's hands. Seeing him happy with her didn't hurt the way I once feared it would. In some strange way, it brought peace. Because I realized his story was never mine to finish. My chapter with him had ended, and a new one had begun, one where I was the main character in my own life again. Sometimes, the greatest gift love gives you isn't forever, it's the courage to let go, to walk away, and to trust that what's meant for you will never require you to lose yourself to keep it. I loved him more than myself once, but now, I love myself enough to know that was the last time I ever would. This was the Untold Love, where hearts speak in whispers and every story leaves a trace behind. If Evelyn's journey touched something deep within you, I'd love for you to join this circle of untold stories. Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your words matter here, because they remind someone out there that they're not alone. And in our next story, we'll step into the life of someone who thought they had moved on until a single message from an unknown number brought back a love they thought was buried forever. Was it fate? Or a test of the heart? You'll find out soon.